I want to welcome on our next guest. We've got Chase Hughes, Wizards reporter, Nationals reporter for NBC Sports Washington. Chase, how's your quarantine going right now?
It's going good. First of all, congratulations on starting your new show and for a good cause. That's really cool, and I appreciate you having me on. And quarantine has been what it is. You know, luckily, my family is safe and everything. All the most important things are in order. And my wife and I actually had our first kid about 6 weeks ago.
That's
So,
awesome.
so it's been a really interesting time in my life for sure.
You didn't have to name the kid Larry, did you?
No, no, did not name him Larry or her. It's a she, and
Oh, shit.
her name is V.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because like Larry Hughes has a nice ring to it. But
Yeah,
so,
I see where you're going. Yeah,
no, but yeah. So,
or Langston.
that's a good one too. That's a good one
Yeah,
too. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had. Jerry, he's in the Bills, but that's basically all
yeah,
I had.
right.
But yeah, so what have you been doing to keep busy?
Well, work has actually been pretty busy. There's been so many things to write about involving the Wizards. I still do a Nationals podcast. And other than that, taking care of an infant keeps you busy. That's for sure.
That's wild. And then so we just finished up the draft. What are your initial thoughts on the Redskins draft? Because I know everybody, you can't say anything wrong about Chase Young. Anybody else kind of catch your eye?
Well, it's so funny as a longtime Redskins fan, when it comes to the draft, I think you get a little bit desensitized over the years, like particularly when it comes to wide receivers. Like they picked a wide receiver in the third round and a wide receiver in the fourth round. And I've learned over the years that, when you watch a running back or wide receiver, especially if they play for a school like Liberty, like the Redskins' fourth round pick, Antonio Gandy Golden did, they're just going to be tearing up the competition. They're going to be faster than everyone. They're going to be bigger. They're going to run back kicks, and no one can tackle them. I just remember watching Samaje Perine tape and Roy Halou and Evan Royster and all these running backs that the Redskins brought in, and they never amounted to anything. So obviously you never know. But I think in terms of the positions, I definitely liked the way they focused their resources a lot on the offensive line. And though I am generally against spending like a top draft pick on a wide receiver, obviously you're in a position where you need to add some playmakers to the supporting cast for Dwayne Haskins, a young quarterback. So I feel good about what they did there. I like Cameron Curl, their seventh round pick. He's a safety, but again, a seventh round pick. What are the odds that they're going to amount to anything? But the Chase Young pick is obviously the story of it all. I guess in addition to the Trent Williams trade. And with Chase Young, I think it's a situation where you just don't want to overthink it. You've got this generational prospect, as everyone says. He's in a position of need. He's a local guy. You've got a new coach who's a defensive guy, and Ron Rivera with Jack Del Rio's defensive coordinator. It's almost like it makes too much sense. To do anything else would have been overthinking it. So I certainly applauded the move, and it was nice when it actually happened so I could watch highlights and get excited for him to be a Redskin.
Yeah, I think he's going to be fantastic. He seems like he fits like a glove, even though they really didn't need another defensive end. But you're not going to pass up on this guy. This guy's a generational prospect, and they're really unless the only thing that really would have gotten my attention is if Cincy had taken him, I wonder what they would have done because I don't think they're going to try to get Burrow and Haskins in another quarterback competition because if Haskins wins again, you just wasted a first round pick. And then I don't even trade down.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have had to really consider Joe Burrow. What he did dominating the SEC and putting in basically one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a college quarterback. Look, I think, he checks off every box. If Tua was healthy, you would have had to consider that. But with Chase Young, I think you're hoping that, you can finally have that front seven be what we thought were going to be for years. They literally set a record, spent more first-round picks in a row on defensive linemen in NFL history. And the most disappointing part of last season for me wasn't the Bruce Allen situation, wasn't Trent Williams, wasn't Dwayne Haskins' development. It was the fact that you spent all these first-round picks on defensive linemen. They were healthy, and they still weren't any good. So now if you add Chase Young and they don't click and it's not a top 10 front seven by whatever measure you want to measure them by, then that's going to be really discouraging as a Redskins fan. So I feel like at this point it almost has to work.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, if Alex Smith never gets hurt and Trent never holds out and they never take Haskins and situations arise where they get a top pick and Tua doesn't have any injury concerns and you're looking for somebody to succeed Alex Smith, that makes sense. The way it's going on now, you just take the best prospect available.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, a quarterback we all know is the most important position on the field. But edge rusher is probably the second most important position. It's probably between that and a left tackle. But given how much an edge rusher can affect a game, if you have a guy like a Khalil Mack or a Von Miller, obviously I'm naming guys that are probably going to be in the Hall of Fame, so I don't want to put too much on Chase Young. But if he can turn into any semblance of that, a guy who gets you 13, 14 sacks a season, for an extended stretch during his career, that can affect the game so much, and it makes your secondary better. It makes your linebackers better. As long as you can reduce the time that the opposing quarterback has to throw the ball, it can have an enormous effect. And also, if you look at Dwayne Haskins, he was not very impressive as a rookie. I think any objective observer would say that. So the best thing to do probably for him is maybe not give him, a top flight wide receiver. It's lower the score, lower the pressure on him. Make it so he only has to lead the Redskins offense to 20 points a game rather than 30. And then maybe he might have an actual chance to develop at his own pace and win some games along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they were before Alex Smith's injury, they were first in the division. They weren't really blowing anybody out, but the defense was playing well. Alex Smith really wasn't doing too much, but it was working. I know they were probably winning games. They were scoring maybe like 16 to 20 points, but it was working. And until Haskins really gets things going, if that's the best case, I know Adrian Peterson would love any carry he can get. So I think they're in a good spot right now going forward, and having a stellar defensive line as they do, I think it's just going to help them.
Yeah, and, going back to Alex Smith, you mentioned him. A lot of people focused on how his numbers weren't impressive. I think he was barely throwing a touchdown a game in those 9 games that he played with the Redskins, but they were 6-3, and a lot of people say, well, quarterback wins don't matter. But what I noticed from Alex Smith in that one season, and I think is the reason why basically everywhere he's gone, he's won. And since, his final days in San Francisco when they figured things out with Jim Harbaugh and went to the NFC Championship game, he is as good as any quarterback I've ever seen at controlling the clock and making timely throws and just moving the chains. And then when you get to the end of the game and it's a 15-14 game, he drives you down and gets you a field goal. So he's not going to be able to win games if you got to win 30-27. But if you keep the score low, he is a master at controlling the clock. And I think people underrate how important that skill is. You control the rhythm of the game and you control the clock. And I remember the Redskins when they were 6-3. We're near the top of the league in time per play and time per possession and possession time of clock that they were eating up. And that was a testament to Alex Smith, who obviously the running game was good that year, but he also helped by getting some first downs with his legs. So I think that's one way you can win, and maybe Dwayne Haskins can develop into that guy early on as long as the defense gives him a chance.
Absolutely. And even with that was a very conservative offense. They really weren't doing anything. If you look at his last year in Kansas City, pretty sure they start off the season 5-0, and he was getting MVP consideration. And then unfortunately, if you got a guy like Patrick Mahomes behind you, you're going to get traded. So, but he can be a great leader in the locker room. I know he's sticking around. I know they're talking about maybe keeping him around the front office. I think he'd be great with that. I think he wants to – I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think it's best if he plays anymore. Not that he wouldn't be great at it, just from a health perspective. Like the guy had 17 surgeries. You got the thing coming on tonight. 17 surgeries. You almost lost your leg. You almost lost your life. You're finally back healthy. I know in his mind as a competitor, he wants to go, I can get back out there. But
yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be interesting to see if he can do it. I heard John Keim, ESPN's Redskins reporter on the radio, making some really good points about how if he tries this hard to come back, even if he falls short, he might create a better quality of life for him moving forward. And basically, he said that all the experts you talk to and the people around him at the facility say that they're not exactly expecting him to play, but they're also not going to bet against him. And I was thinking if he actually returned to the NFL and just played and looked okay, it would honestly be one of the more impressive feats that I think you've ever seen from a professional athlete, and especially the people that know him or close to him that know what he's been through. And I think we're all going to get a better idea of that when we watch the ESPN documentary. It's honestly going to create a level of respect for him that I think is probably unique to him that you may not have seen with other players, knowing what he's gone through and that, is basically he was on his deathbed.
Yeah, it's going to be insane. It's going to be wild. And then just seeing just all the pictures of his leg and all the stories about the sepsis and 17 surgeries. And I know they said that a lot of people at the hospital he was initially at really hadn't done anything of that magnitude. So they kind of moved him over to like a military hospital because the injury was that bad that like combat veterans could be more in common with some of those procedures than he was, which is just wild. But I think, yeah, just that competitive drive. When you get bumped to second string for Colin Kaepernick, and then you do it, then you get bumped to second string for Patrick Mahomes, and then you have this devastating injury. That's got to be killing him as a competitor. But hopefully he's back 100% healthy, and if he can get back in the field, maybe. But it's a risk. It's the same thing with Ryan Shazier. If I know he really wants to come back, but I don't know how it's going to happen.
Yeah, the Ryan Shazier one is almost even more troubling because it's a spinal injury. You feel like if you re-injure that, then, you could risk your life. With Alex Smith, we have seen guys come back from that type of stuff in other sports, Gordon Hayward, Paul George. It really seems like what Alex Smith went through was even a few steps beyond that. But it is, his leg. And I think if he finds the mobility, then, I guess at a base level, he won't be risking his life. I think you would guess if he returned to the NFL football field. Yeah.
And then aside from football season, so that's on hiatus for the foreseeable future. I know they said they might have the deadline pushed back. Well, that I think NFL is going to happen. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you everything's going to be okay. But I think the NFL, they're going to put it on. I don't think fans will be there. But in terms of basketball, we haven't seen March 11th. That day is never going to come out of my mind because I'm literally in the office watching all this stuff kind of implode. You're seeing the game stop. It was the Thunder and the Jazz, and then all of a sudden Tom Hanks and his wife have it, and I'm like, what is going on? So we haven't seen the Wizards in a while. You've been seeing some interviews with Brad Beal. You've given back. I know John Wall had been giving back. I know he donated a lot of masks to the hospital in North Carolina, I think that his mother was at, doing a lot of good in the community. But I feel like a lot of fans, it's been a long time since we've seen John Wall. What do fans, when basketball resumes, assuming it resumes, let's say they start when they resume the season, they say they do the play-in tournament with the 7-8 seeds, or they do the playoffs, and say the Wizards don't play until December. What can fans expect when Wall returns to the court?
Well, first of all, if the regular season does resume, the expectation is, you see my cat walking by. The expectation is that he will not play. They've been pretty definitive, saying that no matter what happens with the 2019-2020 regular season, you're not going to see John Wall. So whenever the 2020-21 season starts, I think opening night, you'll see John Wall. And obviously there's going to be an adjustment. He's coming back from a major surgery, rupturing his Achilles. As a point guard in the NBA, he's got some obstacles to overcome, trying to go up against who are honestly probably the quickest athletes in the world at his position in his league, in the competition he goes up against. So it's going to be tough. But he is going to have a lot of extra time to recover. And I think by the time he gets back, there's no reason to believe that he won't be fully healthy. But that said, he's going to have to work his way back into game shape. He's going to have to work his way back into a rhythm. And I think offensively, people are probably, overstating the effect this injury will have. A lot of people are saying, well, he's known for his speed. What if he loses that speed? I think he's going to be okay offensively, even if he loses a step, because he's still going to be one of the 2 or 3 biggest players at his position. He was so much faster and quicker than everyone that even if he loses a step, he still might be able to separate himself from the pack, or at least against some players. And his passing ability is so uniquely good that that's not going to go away. He's still going to be able to pass over players, and the accuracy and the vision is still going to be there. So I'm not necessarily worried about him offensively. Obviously, you'd like to see him improve his shot, but I think he could adjust his game and maybe be more effective in the post. Defensively is where you're going to have to really watch out for him to start out, because the most difficult part about that injury, as a lot of people have gone through it say, is lateral quickness. So going side to side and staying in front of point guards is going to be difficult doing that. So I think the Wizards need to keep that in mind and probably start working this offseason on building a defensive foundation around him, so that they can mitigate whatever problems he's going to have coming back at first and make things a little bit easier for him.
Just to put it into time perspective, do you remember who the starting 5 was? I don't have it in front of me. Do you remember who the starting 5 was the last game he played?
Well, the last game he played was, I believe it was December 26, 2018. So you're talking about a year and a half ago, essentially. Bradley Beal was probably in the starting lineup.
Porter?
Yes. Yeah, Otto Porter. Markieff Morris, I'd guess, was hurt. And Marcin Gortat wasn't on the team. So not Thomas Bryant. I would say Jan Mahimi and who was our Jeff Green.
Wow. That feels like a while ago. Wow. And then so for this year, assuming they're going to have a pretty good draft pick, you don't know how it's going to roll out yet. Assuming I think, my personal opinion, I think Wall's always benefited from playing with a really good big man when he's in his repertoire, whether it was back in the day with him and McGee. I know the team wasn't good, but they gelled well. And the same thing when they had Nene, same thing with Gortat. Which of these big man prospects coming up in the draft, whenever it happens, do you think would fit in best with the Wizards?
Well, obviously the guy that stands out is James Wiseman. I think from a positional and need fit perspective, he's the best player that the Wizards could luck into, just purely on that. I'm not saying he's going to be the best player in the draft, but they need rebounding, they need rim protection, they need a guy with a high ceiling and a super athlete, and he checks off all those boxes. Now, he only played 3 games in college, so he's a really tough prospect to evaluate. He had the NCAA scandal at Memphis, and it was kind of really unfortunate how it all went down. And I don't think anyone should judge him based on his character because of that. I think he was a guy who came from an upbringing where, it was tough to turn down some of these benefits, these improper benefits. And look, he got caught doing what a lot of other guys probably haven't gotten caught doing. So it was just an unfortunate situation. By all accounts, he's a great kid. Super smart. He knows Mandarin Chinese.
Wow.
He's got a lot of really impressive plans for what he wants to do off the court and after basketball. So I'm thoroughly impressed with him as a person and as an athlete. A lot of people have compared him to David Robinson because he's 7'1". He's 7'1" and is just a complete freak athlete. He's also left-handed, so David Robinson kind of comes to mind. But, maybe he turns out to be a lesser player like a DeAndre Jordan, who's just kind of an off rebounder and defensive guy. But either way, he's the exact type of guy that the Wizards could use. And if they had the number 1 overall pick, that's the guy I would be honing in on at this point.
Do you know right now if the season, if the lottery is set? I know they fixed it up with the top 3 having the equal odds, and then after they have the top 3 each have a certain percentage, and then each following team, as you get down to 14, a less percentage, but everybody has a small sliver of a chance of getting to the top. What range do you think they're in right now to fall in the draft?
So right now, based on the regular season standings, they have the 9th best odds. So another way to look at it is the 9th worst record. Last year, they had the 6th worst record and actually moved back to 9th when they picked Rui Hachimura. But it's interesting because we only have 1 year of data with the new draft lottery odds, right? But what it's done is it's tried to create an equal playing field so that if you tank, it doesn't necessarily reward you like it used to. And what was fascinating about last year is there was not 1, not 2, but 3 cases of a team with much lower odds jumping up into the top 4. We saw it with the New Orleans Pelicans, who went all the way to number 1. They were actually in the 9th spot where the Wizards are now.
That's wild.
The Memphis Grizzlies went all the way up to number 2. I believe they had the 10th best odds. And then the LA Lakers, who I believe had the 11th best odds, moved all the way up to number 4. So it happened 3 times last year. So maybe you can't expect it to happen 3 times, but it could certainly happen once, right? So there's a chance that the Wizards could improve their draft standing. But it's also interesting when you see how the odds break down, because I think they can't pick between like 5th and 8th. So there's this kind of like black hole in their draft lottery odds where it's almost like a boom or bust situation. But if they had a top 5 pick, which there's a decent chance that could happen, they should have a really good opportunity to find a blue chip guy who could potentially change the fortune of the franchise pretty soon.
Yeah, because the teams picking at the top, when you look at it now, so I don't have the schedule in front of me, but the Knicks seem pretty confident with Mitchell Robinson. I don't think they're looking at Wiseman. Definitely the Warriors. You don't know if they're going to move him, so that could potentially be something else. Sacramento, I don't really think so. You got a decent young core. You just took Bagley a couple years ago.
There's Cleveland with Andre Drummond. There's Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns. There's the Atlanta Hawks, who have John Collins, although I think he's going to leave in free agency, and also Clint Capella. So, yeah, there's some teams that you wonder is Wiseman a fit. But I just don't think he's going to fall that far, because when you watch him on tape, it's like the athleticism is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, and then switching over to baseball, I think baseball is the soonest to come back than anything else. Based on just thinking about all the players on the field, no fans. If there's no force outs, players don't need to they're not touching each other. They can stand a couple feet apart. If they wear gloves, I don't know how the mask situation is. I don't know if they could get them like oxygen masks. I don't know how that would work. Maybe Major League Baseball knows about that. But I feel like baseball, if everybody can agree to it and it's safe and it can happen, I think baseball is the soonest to come back. Would you agree with that?
Soonest to come back. That's a tough thing to gauge because I don't know, because maybe the NBA could get things in order quicker because they're already technically mid-season. But any league is probably going to require a few weeks to get things started. What is interesting about baseball is every team has a secondary home for spring training, and they're centrally located, right? You've got a bunch of fields in Arizona and a bunch of fields in Florida. So that is an advantage for them. And, a lot of these ideas that they've thrown out there, I've kind of shot down on our Nationals Talk podcast and radio interviews. But then you hear Anthony Fauci, who's kind of the lead of all this, say that, hold on a second, actually, there may be an opportunity to open baseball up without fans. He's actually a Nationals fan. So who am I to argue against him? So I think baseball, it sounds like, is maybe getting the most creative with their ideas to reopen sports. So maybe based on that, I would say that they have an opportunity maybe to be the first league, but it's really tough to gauge. And especially when you say, okay, when could it happen? Well, we're sitting here in early May, and you know how much has changed in less than 2 months. You mentioned March 11th. We're not even at the 2-month anniversary of that, right? So how am I supposed to project into July when maybe, baseball's talked about coming back? It's really impossible at this point.
Yeah, I saw somebody floated the possibility. I don't know where I heard it. For NBA, they said like they could do 2 cruise ships and have one Eastern Conference and one Western Conference. I'm like, well, this is a bad idea. But like, you dock it, you restrict everybody who's on. I know they said, I think I saw somebody said last night that the NBA is looking to get 15,000 tests, which is not right now. I don't think it's very possible. But baseball will be interesting because once you lose the ball, you're not going to get it. Basketball, somebody can stand outside and make sure it doesn't go in the water. But I think there's so many people spitballing, and there's so many different ideas. And the thing is, the fact that really it's all just kind of hearsay and nothing's really set in motion, I don't think it's coming back that soon. I know a lot of times they've been floating around maybe July, but there's a lot of technicalities they're going to have to figure out. And the players are going to have to agree to it. I know the players, I don't think they've been paid yet because the season hasn't really begun. I know it was a week and a half before opening day. So I know the players are going to want to get paid. The fans are going to want to have something to watch. There's nothing on right now. Tiger King was a month and a half ago, and The Last Dance is going to be long gone by July. So I don't know. Ozark is good, but there's only a couple episodes. But I think they're going to try to figure it out.
By the way, if you need something to listen or to watch, Nathan For You, I've re-caught up on that. Unbelievably funny, that show.
I was watching old Tosh.0 highlights from 2010, and I'm like, how is this show still on? Like it's still it was still good. I'm like this, he caught on as soon as YouTube and everything was coming in, they're like, all right, we're going to show him that, and it's wild, but it's just it's wild, and they've had so many guest stars on that thing, but it's insane. But yeah, but so if you were to bet which sport comes back first, would you say basketball?
Yeah, I would say basketball or hockey just because they are mid-season. And I don't know, some of the ideas, who am I to say that they aren't unrealistic? Maybe they just sound as realistic as anything that baseball's come up with. The NBA, there's fewer players to account for. There's a few things that are working in the NBA's favor. So, maybe there's a convention center or a Vegas casino where they could just pack everyone in. And, it's much easier to get the whole league in one place because you're talking about literally half the players. So I guess I would probably go with the NBA. But also it's also a contact sport,
Yeah, especially with Vegas. I'm sure the guys with families would be a little bit kind of hesitant, but for the single guys, they got some nice pools. Some of those hotels are beautiful. I don't know if they're going to give you musical acts, but they got some nice stuff. You could gamble. I don't know if they really want you to gamble, but it seems enticing if it's safe. But for the guys with families, that's why with baseball, I know they floated the idea of having a league in Arizona, Texas, and Florida, which I don't really know how that worked. The initial one they said was Arizona. Was kind of hesitant, but when the second one they said, okay, we can have it in Arizona and Florida, where all the spring training sites are, where most of the guys probably already have homes, that kind of rung with me because I'm like, all right, then their families can be with them.
Yeah, and that seems to be the biggest concern if you hear from a lot of Major League Baseball players and their wives, is that we don't want to be separated from our family for 3-4 months at a time. It's already, baseball is already very tough on family life. There's a lot of travel. Sometimes you're gone for 3 weeks. You play every single day. You're, just playing a game. There's so much wasted time, and honestly, at a baseball park, between how long batting practice takes and how early those guys are expected to get there. I covered baseball for a while. I feel like it's a bit of an antiquated system. So these guys are there from like 3 o'clock to 11 p.m. every day or much longer, especially with doubleheaders and rain outs and how long the games go. So it's already very tough. And you hear like some of the wives, especially the ones that are pregnant and are expecting, kids to be born mid-season, to be separated from their husbands is a real tough pill to swallow. And then you look at some of the names of these people, like Mike Trout's wife is expecting, Clayton Kershaw's wife is expecting, Ryan Zimmerman, who obviously has a lot of pull with the Nationals, his wife is expecting. So that's a hurdle I just don't see how they can get over.
Yeah, well, for Trout, as long as the season's over, if his child isn't born by late September, he should be good. Because so
hey, they got Anthony Rendon now.
Oh, that's true. And I heard somebody say the other day, they said Otani. So who was it? Somebody said Otani is like the best player, the best prospect ever seen. I don't know if I saw some headline with that, but they should be fun to. And then for the Nationals this year, so they're still the reigning champions, even though we're 7 months removed from the World Series. What do you expect when the season does resume, or when it commence?
Well, I expect it to be really emotional, honestly, for a lot of people who are playing the game and at the game and fans watching, because whatever sport returns first, it's just going to be an amazing moment. Hopefully they can find out how to do so in a safe way so that there's no outbreak that's, that is caused by any of this. But I think it's going to be a real special moment when sports return. As far as baseball, it seems like baseball, in order to make this happen, is probably going to have to get more creative than the other leagues in terms of like division alignment, which is very important in baseball. Divisions don't really matter in basketball, but in baseball, they're very important. And you've seen some reports about how they could be structured based on geography. So the Nationals might be in the same division as like the Yankees, Red Sox, and Orioles, for instance, because it would be like kind of a northeastern quadrant. So that could be fascinating. Beyond the most important part of this whole process, which is finding out how to keep everyone safe, is going to be one of the more interesting experiments that we've seen in the history of sports, where things are going to have to be adjusted. It's going to be a truncated season in all likelihood, right? There's going to be fewer games, so they're going to matter more. Their division rivals are going to be different. So I'm interested to see, how does this affect the game itself? And, in baseball, where you play matters too. The weather, the dimensions of the ballpark, and the way that a lot of the plans that have been put out there, involve playing in Arizona or playing all the games at Chase Field. So things are going to be affected by all this, like in terms of the results of the games, which I think is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and especially like with all of that, with all the ideas people are floating out, like you saw a horse that ESPN did, and we're like, it was a great idea in hindsight. I think the biggest takeaway from that is Mike Conley's got a nice house. But aside from that, like they're gonna have to be creative, because they're gonna have to make sure they have all the parameters set in case another Rudy Gobert situation does happen. I know, so it's going to be very interesting. Maybe, I don't know if they're just spacing people out, a lot of tests, contract tracing, a little bit of everything. It appears that with the weather getting warmer, that's not really going to do anything. But it's going to be very interesting. But hopefully we can get sports back real soon. And I really wanted to thank you again for coming on. And then how could people reach you on social media?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. And again, congratulations for the podcast. You can find me on Twitter, is probably the best place, at Chase Hughes NBCS.
All right, cool, awesome, man. Well, thanks again. If you have a son, Larry Langston, or Jerry would be great names. Maybe, yeah, that could be interesting too. But yeah, hope stay safe out there. Hope the best for your family, and hopefully we can get back to the office soon, because it's been a while.